For our final story today, Nebraska ranks #1 in the U.S. when it comes to producing popcorn. In fact, we grow more than 350 million pounds annually. And while popcorn currently contains many nutrients and is a great source for energy, UNL Plant Geneticist Dr. David Holding is researching ways to up the protein value even more.
Cereal grains typically lack several what we call essential amino acids. Now the most prominent amino acid that's deficient in cereal grains such as corn and sorghum is lysine. There are various strategies we can use to try and raise that lysine so that to bring these cereals into the realm where they're what we call a complete protein source. So my research has focused quite a bit over the years on this thing called quality protein maize. This is a variety of dent corn that actually, through a natural mutation in a gene called opaque-2, it actually changes the protein profile in corn. So that the proteins that are deficient in lysine go down to a much lower level, and proteins that are naturally higher in lysine accumulate to a much higher level. And it stemmed from a line called opaque-2 that was discovered more than 100 years ago now. This original variety of opaque-2 had softer kernels, okay, which is not useful. And then breeders got hold of this opaque-2 and started breeding back in the kernel hardness, but it has this double the amount of this essential amino acid lysine. So about 5 or 6 years ago, Conagra Foods came to UNL and they brought their breeding program with them, and I started a project, kind of fun project, to try and take this quality protein maize dent corn and cross that with popcorn, which is the same species. This was quite a complicated breeding program, because typically when you take dent corn and you cross that into popcorn, you end up with corn that doesn't pop, which is obviously not useful at all.
Right, yeah, I can't do that.
So this breeding project was quite challenging in that we had to not only increase the lysine, which was obviously our #1 goal, but recover all of the popping, sufficient popping to make this a useful product.
When you're increasing the lysine content in those grains, so I'm sure there's going to be that important nutritional impact, maybe an important economical impact. What are some specifics you could tell us with that?
Well, popcorn improvement in recent years has really focused on just maintaining and increasing popping volume, okay? There's been very little research into kind of exploring different avenues to improve popcorn. So as with all corn that's grown by farmers, what they're actually growing are hybrid varieties, okay? And this is why we were very careful at the beginning to make multiple different inbred lines of this quality protein popcorn. And we've been successful at that. We have at least 6 different inbreds, and we're basically trying all the different hybrid combinations of those inbreds. What we anticipate from that is that we'll end up with a product that has equivalent popping to the original parents, but we're also looking at the different potential ways that we can improve the agronomics of this.
Gotcha. And some people watching may be familiar a little bit with CRISPR, and the way I understand it, put very simply, CRISPR is gene editing technology, but at a very, very precise level from what you're telling me. So what are some of the ways that you've been using CRISPR in your work?
So what we tried to do was to use CRISPR to, again, reduce the level of these storage proteins that contain low levels of lysine and increase the levels of other proteins that have high lysine. By doing that, we also changed the protein bodies in a way that they're more receptive to the gastric proteases in the animals that eat them. So what we did was we took this CRISPR approach and used it to just simply reduce the level of these dominant storage proteins.
What can we expect next as far as how close this is being put into use in the industry, or next steps of what you see here?
The next stage is taking these lines and breeding in those other traits at the same time as removing the CRISPR agent that we used for the editing. So the gene edits in that prolamin storage protein family are permanent, but the transgene is not. Once those edits have been introduced, we can then get rid of the transgene. and end up with a product which is not regulated in the same way that a typical GM trait would be regulated. So it can potentially hit the market much quicker.
Dr. Holding has previously applied this research to sorghum, but with the support of ConAgra Foods, he hopes to achieve a marketable version of higher quality popcorn in the near future.